What is up, everybody? Happy Wednesday, midweek show for you on the Orange and Black Insider. We've been going end of the week. We've been all over the map, John. We've been going weekends. Our schedules are a little crazy, but we are kind of trying to get back to our midweek platform, and in doing so, we have a very special guest today, which we are very, very excited about. I'm Anthony. He's John. How's your week going, John? You helped spearhead this great interview opportunity that we're going to get to in just a minute, so I appreciate that, and I'm sure our listeners do as well. But how's the rest of your week going, bud?
It's been good. Feeling like old times. Back on Wednesday. Bengals are in pads. There's football to be had for at least 98% of the roster going on, so vibes are good. Trying to keep them that way, I guess.
Vibes are good. Yeah, I mean, that's... We're a full week in now to the to Bengals training camp, and there's been a lot of interesting elements to it, be it from their stars or their new players. And we've been talking a lot about it, and we are going to bring in someone a lot smarter, at least a lot smarter than me. I don't want to say he's smarter than you, John, but he's definitely much more wise than I am. I'm a dummy. He is the creator of DVOA. You can see his work on FTN Fantasy, and you have seen his work on ESPN. He is a well-known and well-respected voice in the NFL community, and we are happy to have him on, Mr. Aaron Schatz, joining the program. How are you, sir? Good to have you on.
Hey, hello. I'm good. It feels good to be in training camps, man. It feels good to be talking about the season.
Well, we're happy to have you on. It's the first time we've had you on, and I'm a little ashamed because it's been far too long to have this invitation out to you and have you on, but appreciate you coming on. And of course, you have the 2024 Almanac. You're there. I think you got it at the ready. You know, that is so bittersweet who is on the cover of that for a Bengals
I know.
show, because UC kid, but man, he has become a little bit of an enemy to Bengals faithful. But tell us, we'll recap it at the end of the interview as well. But tell us a little bit about that almanac right there that you just showed off on the screen there.
Yeah, this is the 20th book by me and my staff. We do this every preseason. Chapters on every team, all kinds of advanced stats from last year. The most accurate team projections, fantasy football projections from the award-winning Jeff Radcliffe. It's all in one big package. You can get an online version at ftnfantasy.com/almanac. There's a discount if you're an FTN subscriber, and also a physical copy. That's this sucker right here with Travis Kelce on the cover at Amazon. Just search for FTN Football Almanac 2024.
Well, I am going to get my copy for sure coming up here. And that's fantastic stuff. But let's talk a little bit specifically about the Cincinnati Bengals, and I'm going to kind of start, a little bit of a disappointment last year because of injuries and all kinds of different things that took place. Still, we're in it towards the end, right? I mean, a couple games away from potentially sneaking into the playoffs. But what kind of just as a holistic view, what the Bengals did this offseason in free agency and with their draft class, what were your impressions? And, how do you kind of see some of these guys making potentially sizable impacts on the roster this year?
First, a note about last year's disappointment. The Bengals were one of the 10 hardest schedules ever measured by average DVOA of opponent, and our numbers go back 45 years.
Wow.
It was a really hard schedule, made harder by the fact that our numbers loved Baltimore to a ridiculous extent, but their whole schedule was hard. And so they kind of got the shaft that way. The other thing I'm going to say about last year is Jake Browning was a lot better than people realize. Means by bringing Joe Burrow back, you are not getting as much of a bump as you might expect in getting better. Obviously, going forward, it's not even a question who you would rather have. You would rather have the quarterback with more talent and a much, much longer track record of playing that well, which is Joe Burrow. But Browning was pretty good last year. It was kind of shocking. So I think what the Bengals did this offseason, I think they looked at it and they said, we should be a Super Bowl contender. And they made moves with that in mind. And that was the right mindset. This is not a rebuilding team, right? This is a Super Bowl contender. And it was interesting bringing in the safeties, when they had a couple of younger safeties and they said, no, you know what? We want to go with these veteran safeties from other teams. And that's sort of an interesting move. And Trent Brown, coming from New England, which is where I live, he had a very weird year last year. And I don't know what's all going on in his brain, not to mention his body. But when he plays airs, he's a pretty darn good tackle. So that's a nice addition too. And at least they have insurance on the, with the first round pick.
Right.
So I'm looking at all the DVOA stuff, which everyone can find on ftnfantasy.com, and just looking at the total DVOA and then looking at past schedules. Is that the schedule, the strength of schedule metric that you referred to?
Yeah, and I believe they're listed as number 1, but if you look at all 45 years, they're like 9th or 10th or something out of 45 years. It was a crazy hard schedule.
And just for reference, they're at 9.9%. Second this year was Pittsburgh at 6.3%. So pretty big of a jump there.
That's the average DVOA of their 17 opponents. Yeah, it's really high.
Yeah, it definitely stands out looking at the spreadsheet. But going back to Browning, I think everyone kind of saw the efficiency of his production kind of take a jump after his first start. And a lot of people attribute that to a lot of the schematic changes that the Bengals kind of made with him under center. So now going back to Burrow, I guess, from a DVOA lens, where has he kind of excelled in his formidable years when he's been healthy? And where do you think he still has more to prove to really increase his efficiency? Because from my understanding, DVOA is really the foundation of that is looking at efficiency compared to just the average opponent that you play. So where are the jumps that Burrow still needs to make, but where does he also kind of impress that makes him one of the best?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't quite know if I'm quite prepared for that question. I will say that his sack rate was really high in 2021 and his 2020 and has gone down. So that's a place where he's really improved. That's the improvement that he's made already in the last couple of years. Obviously, the offensive line has something to do with that, but we know that sack rate has a lot to do with quarterbacks as well. I think Burrow is, to me, he is the tip top of the thinking quarterback, right? He doesn't have the arm to do what Justin Herbert does. But when it comes to things like making changes at the line and finding his receivers and accuracy, and he's very good. His accuracy took a dip last year. His completion percentage above expected, but you can probably blame the injuries a little bit from that. And that completion percentage above expected was really good the 2 years before that. So I don't think that his accuracy is suddenly a problem.
Talking with Aaron Schatz, he is with FTN Fantasy and a contributor at ESPN. We've also linked in our live chats, and we'll do so in the comments section or the show description on our YouTube channel to the Almanac. We put both the Amazon link to it as well as the FTN Fantasy link. You could get it either place, so please go check that out. When we thank Aaron for his time joining us today. The Bengals kind of did it's been a little bit of an off season of change from the last 2 or 3 years where there was a lot of continuity, right? On both offense and defense, there are a couple of valuable players from the last couple of years that the Bengals let go in free agency and opted not to re-sign them. I'm going to focus on the defensive side of the ball, namely the interior defensive line, because and this kind of goes back a little bit to my first question of, what the Bengals did in the offseason, what they did in the draft, et cetera. They opted to let DJ Reader walk, and he went to the Detroit Lions, kind of your classic nose tackle, but a highly effective player. And now they're kind of trying to recreate the sum of the parts, right? With with Sheldon Rankins and Chris Jenkins Jr. and a couple of other players, and not really that big true nose tackle. I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on Reader's value to the team, Reader's value to the Lions, and what the Bengals are trying to do with those players on the interior defensive line.
I mean, I think Reader's really valuable because he was a nose tackle who could play all three downs, right, who could also rush the passer. We have him with 19 pass pressures last year. He was not like two down, like a Bobby Brown from the Rams kind of guy, where he like never plays on third down and hardly ever plays on second down, right? Just like first down running, and second and short. That's it, right? But that, there's less of a place for that guy in the modern NFL. We know analytically that the passing game runs the NFL. I mean, yeah, you want to stop the run, especially on downs that are clear running downs. But pass rush rules all. And I think that the idea of maybe going with smaller defensive tackles, Rankins is more of a pass rusher than a run stopper, I think makes some sense in the modern NFL. I mean, yeah, you want to have both. You want to have you'd like to have somebody on the roster who's the guy you bring in on 3rd and 1 to stuff up the middle. But I think, Jenkins also is a more pass rush oriented defensive tackle, right? And they took in the 2nd round. So I don't think it's a bad strategy.
Well, sticking with the defense there, because that's where the biggest drop off from 2022 to 2023 was for the Bengals. There were two really big themes that stood out: the allowing of so many explosive plays, while also kind of balancing that out with a lot of these turnovers that they forced kind of in the red zone. So the Bengals ended up 23rd in defensive DVOA last year with all those explosive plays allowed. How much did that kind of impact that drop off? And is that something that you've seen over the course of your time doing this? How much of a sustainability is that of teams kind of turning around from year to year?
I think that first of all, takeaways tend to regress to the mean pretty heavily. So if the Bengals had a lot of takeaways on defense, that's going to tend to regress towards the mean. So that's not good. On the other hand, I think that a lot of the explosive play allowing was the loss of the safeties, right? And if getting Von Bell back, and if Geno Stone can be as good as he was for the Ravens last year, then they should prevent more explosive plays. And cornerback play is really interesting because it's super important and also super inconsistent. Like, no matter how you measure cornerback play, whether it's anecdotally or charting stats or PFF grades, it just doesn't correlate very well from year to year. So I can look at their corners and be like, Hilton was good and the other two guys were kind of average. I have no idea what they're going to do this year. That's the weird thing about cornerback play.
Talking with Aaron Schatz with FTN Fantasy and contributor at ESPN. Having a great time chatting some Bengals, spending a few more minutes with him. We did put, as I mentioned earlier, the links to the FTN Fantasy 2024 Almanac, both on Amazon and on the FTN Fantasy website. So
I'll add, by the way, that the Bengals chapter is written by Robert Weintraub, who some Bengals fans may know. He's a Bengals fan himself, so he knows the team very well.
Fantastic. Yeah, we know him well. Great contributor. Thank you for that. So go get your copy today. And, my last question was kind of a little bit on the cautious side of, oh boy, what are the Bengals going to do in interior defensive line? Is this a good pivot? Now I'm kind of going to go, well, there's a similar thing going on at the wide receiver position with Tyler Boyd exiting. And now you've got kind of Gesicki playing this hybrid role, tight end, kind of big slot receiver. You bring in Jermaine Burton. Obviously, we know Chase and Higgins can move inside and outside in different packages. So as valuable and great as Tyler Boyd has been for many years with the Cincinnati Bengals, there seems to be a bit of excitement in terms of a little more speed, a little more versatility out of the slot position, thus making the Bengals offense a little bit more diverse, even though a valuable player like Boyd walks out of the door. I guess I kind of want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, I'm sure that they would rather have a guy and be like, that's the guy, man. That's the slot. Like, we knew who that guy is. Gesicki was not good last year for the Patriots. Obviously, some of that is the quarterback play that he was playing with, but he never really established himself as anything for the Patriots. And then the thing is, though, that like Irwin in particular, Like Irwin is very underrated. Like nobody really knows who he is, but he always performs when he given a chance. So that's good. And I know that they believe in Yoshavash a lot, and we all like saying his name. But losing Boyd is a loss, but you're talking about a guy who is getting older, and it is the third receiver. Like the top two are there. Like if Higgins's mind is plugged into trying to get as much money as he can next year, he should ball out, which means they've got two great starters. So I think they can mix and match to fill that third slot. I just, coming from Massachusetts, I would just say don't expect as much from Gesicki as you might expect. He just didn't do anything last year.
You hear that, folks? Aaron Schatz, biggest hater of Mike Gesicki that we know.
Bucket of cold water right there for you. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, look, I wish him luck for a bounce back, and certainly he didn't get help from the quarterbacks here. But
right.
That is 100% true. Well, without spoiling all of your projections in the book that we want everyone to read, if anyone's still on the fence about DVOA, the entire AFC North was ranked in the top 11 last year. The best division in football. I think everyone could definitely agree on that. But without obviously giving away your predictions and your projections, what do you kind of forecast for the division this year? You're sensing a Baltimore repeat because they were so good last year. Is there regression there? Where do the Bengals kind of fall in all this?
Yeah, we have 3 AFC North teams in the top 11 of our projections. We have the Steelers taking a step back. Our numbers liked the Steelers offense much more than the general public did last year, partly because they played a really hard schedule. And I think their defense may take a step back as well. So we really see it as the Browns, the Bengals, and the Ravens. The Ravens were so good during the regular season last year. So good. One of the best teams we've ever measured because they had big, dominating wins over good opponents, right? So like they had big wins, and then they had opponent adjustments that were huge for beating San Francisco and Miami and Detroit. So we have to have them high this year. Like even when you account for the loss of the offensive lineman and the loss of Mike McDonald, I think you still have to expect the Ravens to be very, very good. But we also expect the Bengals to be good. The mean projections represent the average of a range of possibilities, right? But that average for the Bengals is higher than last year, right? We have their defense rebounding a little bit. We like, some of the additions. We like a rebound given that they were better 2 years ago. We have their offense rebounding a little bit. Getting Burrow back obviously is a plus. We don't really care about running backs, so losing Mixon doesn't really mean anything in our projections. So the Bengals also have a very easy schedule, which the whole division has a much easier schedule, much easier than last year. But I believe the Bengals have the easiest schedule out of the 4 teams in the division. So, we think the Bengals are absolutely in the hunt this year. If Baltimore takes a step back, they're in the hunt for the division. They're absolutely in the hunt for a wild card. They should be better than last year, and they're one of the teams to watch out for. Now, here is the biggest problem for the Bengals and the Ravens and the Browns. In DVOA projection, 8 of the top 12 teams are AFC teams, which means we could be right about all 8 of those teams, and one of them still has to miss the playoffs.
Yeah. And a lot of those, I'm assuming, without naming names, a lot, maybe even all of them, are on the Bengals slate of schedule. You got the
are
the
they? Because
teams.
We have the Bengals with a fairly easy schedule. Do they play the West or the South?
The West.
AFC.
They play the West, yeah.
Yeah, which is an easy division with one good team.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And then their own division. Yeah. Okay.
And they don't play a first place schedule, so they're not playing Houston.
Yeah.
We have the AFC East is pretty good, but they're only have to play one of those teams from the AFC East. I don't remember which one it is.
I think it's the Patriots, week 1.
Which is which we have better than everybody else because we like their defense, but is clearly the worst of the 4 AFC East teams. The Bengals schedule is easy. Yeah. It's a huge change from last year, like a huge change.
Well, hopefully that bodes well for them. And I think if I saw correctly, FTN Fantasy had the Bengals over/under wins for the season at I think 10.5. I think I recently saw that.
Yeah, our projection in the book is 9.8, but our book projections tend to be a little bit conservative. So I don't remember what it is in Vegas. Is it 9.5 in Vegas?
I think so, yeah.
So we're a little bit over Vegas. It's not one that I'd really go putting money on either way. But I mean, the Bengals are a good team that will be good and have an easy schedule. Like, I feel pretty confident that we're going to have a good season out of this team.
That's great to hear. I want to ask you like 800 more questions because I love picking your brain, but I don't know if we want to. I think we kind of want to leave that as the mic drop a little bit because we love hearing that. Aaron Schatz of FTN Fantasy, ESPN contributor, one of the most well-respected minds and voices in the NFL. And yes, please plug that one more time. The FTN 2024
FTN
Almanac.
Football Almanac 2024. And if you win the Super Bowl, you can be on the cover. Well, not you, but your quarterback will be on the cover. We put their quarterback was on the cover of last year's book. So we had
you're running out of Chiefs players. I get it. Yeah.
Different this year. But it used to be we did the color of the Super Bowl champion, and now that we're with FTN, we can use actual photos. Very exciting.
You go. Very exciting. Very licensing. You gotta
so
love
we'll have
that.
Blondie. We'll have Blondie on the cover of the book if the Bengals win the Super Bowl.
Well, I was hoping if the Bengals win, because you're projecting a strong season from them on our show, that we would be, like you said, we would be on the cover. But I guess
we'll put the three of us on with a little box.
There you go. There you go. I love it. Where can, aside from the great work you're doing with the Almanac and at FTN Fantasy, ESPN, and other outlets, where can they find you on Twitter and all kinds of good stuff so they
Twitter
can follow you?
Threads, Schatz NFL, ASCHATZ NFL. That is my handle on X or Twitter, and Threads.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know you're a busy guy. You got a lot to do, but we appreciate you carving out some time talking some Bengals and giving us a good outlook on them this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Good luck for this season. Hopefully it's a good one.
All right. Appreciate it. Hopefully we can have you on again, sir. We'd love it.
You got it.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right. Aaron Schatz. Unfortunately, I think I maybe mispronounced his last name a couple of times there. Didn't mean to do that, but good to have him on this program. John, thank you for spearheading that interview opportunity. I know some stuff about football, but sometimes you get people on here and you go, wow, that is a very intelligent and a very different standpoint or viewpoint than you have on your own. So I respect the heck out of him. I've followed him for a long time. And that was great. Hey, he's projecting a strong season from him. So we like that.
Yeah. And that just kind of verifies that all of the optimism is pretty well founded, right? It is a relatively easy schedule the Bengals have. They have their quarterback back. And I think it's always useful to have a different perspective on things. DVOA has been around for, like you said, decades at this point, or at least the data goes back decades, and it's kind of been within the NFL media circle for a long time as well. But I still think a lot of people don't really know a lot about it. They don't really understand it. And what they don't understand, they typically don't like to really go into any further. But it has been very useful in terms of my study and my research of the NFL and the Bengals over the years. And it's because it's very useful. And it takes into account the things that kind of matter on the field. And it does a great job of projecting and predicting. So it was great to talk to him.
Yeah, I'm going to, again, we put the links to the Almanac in there. And so you definitely want to get that. And we will, I'm going to run out and grab mine here. I like the, I don't know. Did he say they do digital copies? I don't know. I like the hard copy myself. But,
very old soul of you.
I am. I know. I'm a print media, legacy media guy. I don't know. Whatever. But at any rate, Aaron Schatz joining us, FTN Fantasy, ESPN. He has been around for a while, and for good reason, because he is a well-respected NFL voice, and we were happy to have him here on the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, where you can get this show and a handful of others, 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin, talking football with Bengal Jim and friends, and Matt and Willie No Ball with Willie Lutz and Matt Minnick, the coach Matt Minnick, on the Believe Insight. We are now on the Believe Network. You gotta go resubscribe to the Believe Network. Leave us a rating as well. We're kind of starting over that feed, from, not from scratch, because we've got all the same shows, same people, and we're keeping up the momentum. But the feed itself lost its, the followers and all that kind of stuff. So we got to rebuild that thing. Please if you listen to us on the audio side, whether that is on iTunes or Spotify or other major outlets, please resubscribe, leave us a rating there. We would greatly appreciate it. And of course, you can get this show, if you like the YouTube or the video side of things, you can get it on our YouTube channel underneath John and that Cincy Jungle icon. There is an Orange and Black Insider show icon. Click that, do the subscribe thing, do the thumbs up thing, do the bell thing, all of that. We appreciate it. We've got our shows on there. 3 and Out is continuing to put some stuff on our YouTube channel as well, just to house those there with us. We love having those guys with us. And then, of course, Cincy Jungle's Facebook page, we stream live there. If you're a Facebook fan, go like that page and catch our streams there, our videos after the fact, that sort of thing. Keep it to cincyjungle.com as well as A2ZSports.com, where John's doing some great writing for your Bengals news, opinions, analysis, etc. Okay. We'll be here just a little while longer. We are through the first week of Bengals training camp, and there are some observations. I want to start with a tweet that you had put out, John Sheeran, earlier on Wednesday that spoke to the right tackle situation. And, Mims is out there. Trent Brown, we kind of talked a little bit of Trent Brown with Aaron Schatz here in just a second ago, but look, he's looking pretty good. I think pretty good, especially because of the concerns with the limited snaps and limited film in college, etc. And you kind of said, hey, I'm keeping receipts on the people who said this pick is an Ogbuehi-like pick because of, raw talent, all those kind of talking points. As we look at it and we see him now in action, we saw it a bit just in general of the size and everything, who he is, the strength, all that kind of stuff, how he measured out in a lot of different ways. To me, it's just, obviously, there were things that the team liked about Ogbuehi coming out of the draft, playing some different positions, all that kind of stuff. But he obviously kind of seemed to be a jack of all trades, master of none type of player. And then now you've got Amarius Mims and his, you just see the traits that pop off way more so than they did with Ogbuehi. And looking back, anyone who kind of made that Ogbuehi comparison, was off. For me, the only Ogbuehi comparison was maybe a little bit of inexperience and questions on that. But Mims is looking pretty good.
It was a thing when, like, after he visited and it became apparent that he was like a target, it was the first time he would have been the first tackle that they would have selected since Ogbuehi in the first round. So naturally, I think it came up because of not only that, but the fact that they were huge athletes with incredible wingspans and athleticism. So I saw it a decent amount, like during that time leading up to the draft. And I just thought it was irresponsible because while those similarities existed, it's so not enough to like even associate Mims and Ogbuehi within the same conversation. I think maybe the injury that Ogbuehi suffered, leading up to the draft, while Mims suffered an injury as well. Maybe that was another parallel that people made, but it was just not enough for me, like on the physical side, to like compare the two outside of like their measurables. But the reason why I brought it up like now this week after a week of camp is because throughout OTAs, throughout mini camp, and now throughout 1 week of training camp, the buzz on Mims goes beyond just how he's looked on the field. He's totally, completely locked in and bought in to just getting better and being the best that he can be. And the lasting memory, at least that I have of Ogbuehi, not only was the fact that he got dominated by Myles Garrett and any other edge rusher with a pulse, he just looked like he didn't care. Like he looked like he was just out there collecting a check. And that was no more evident than I think it was like 7 years ago when the Bengals were getting beat up by the Jaguars and he allowed like a sack on Andy Dalton. The guy just ran by him and he just looked at Dalton on the ground and just kind of walked away. It was from that point on that it seemed like he knew he was bad and it just wasn't going to get any better. And he just wasn't focused on getting better. And that's why he was cut before his rookie contract was up. He was he was a part of final cuts in 2018 when they could have kept him on for another year. Like he was not only just a bad player, but he had a bad mindset. And I think it was just the total definition of a bust. And the fact that none of us really knew a lot about Amarius Mims, the person, before he was drafted, upon hearing all this effusive praise from Frank Pollock, from his teammates, from Zach Taylor, just about his mentality of taking on this potentially immense responsibility of being a week 1 starter, like he's already ahead of where where Cedric Ogbuehi was for the first few years of his NFL career. So that's obviously a great sign towards Mims eventually potentially reaching that potential of his, because it's only been one padded practice for him. He's still got a long ways to go before I think people are confident and ready to name him the starter. But just already based off of the things that we've now learned about him, the person, like he's wired to be much better than any tackle that the Bengals have drafted in a long time.
Oddly enough, you mentioned an issue against the Jaguars. That's where he ended up right after the Bengals. That was the next team. He was, just talking about Ogbuehi, he was on, teams at least through the offseason up until last year, Dolphins and Jets. He has bounced around. You look at it, Jaguars in 2019, Seahawks for 2 years, 2020 and 2021, the Ravens in 21, Titans also in 21. That was an offseason deal. Texans in 22, was on the Jets roster after that in 22. Then, as I mentioned, the Dolphins and Jets as early as last season. So, that's a completely different conversation, and we're not really focusing on him anymore, really, anyway, except for this point, a talking point here in terms of Mims and the comparison that is not a comparison between he and Cedric Ogbuehi. So, at any rate, looking good there. Some questions a little bit about, Trent Brown and what's going on there, but we talked about some things. I found it kind of interesting, and maybe Aaron, who didn't really have effusive praise for Gesicki from what we've, wanted, what we've been saying and what we've been seeing out of him, kind of pointing to the opposite a little bit. So, things are looking pretty good there. The Bengals wide receivers, especially when, Chase is kind of sitting on the side, that sort of thing, they're stepping up and making some plays. The quarterbacks are looking good for the most part, regardless if Joe Burrow is in or out in practice. So the offensive side of the ball, despite some new faces, despite some guys not in there all the time, looking pretty good.
I would say, and it helps having, I think, the quarterback out there. So like the rhythm is all good. It's what they're used to going back to Bay when they first started installing everything. So like, I think we've had some standouts in years past at the wide receiver position, but I think just the consistent ramp up with everything kind of being the same and not having to, go through like a sudden quarterback change or everything like that. Everyone's in kind of familiar territory with the units that they're in, and the roles are changing too. Like some days, Yoshi can be in the slot. Maybe that's where T. Higgins is for most of the day. Maybe Jermaine Burton gets some run there. It's been a lot of rotation in that regard, but I think like Yoshi specifically is definitely separating himself, and I think Burton is doing everything that he can to kind of maintain like his standing as well. So that seems to be just a ferocious battle for who will eventually be the third receiver in that group. And obviously, Trent Irwin is still hauling down deep passes, perfect passes from Joe Burrow down the sideline. So he's obviously still in the mix. And then, Charlie Jones is on track to being like the sixth receiver in this group, and he's having a much better camp than he did last year because he's not dealing with the torn labrum that he suffered early as a rookie in training camp. So receivers are typically like an early star position in training camp, but I think this year has kind of been emphasized just because of all the stability on offense, and you're not having like days where defense is dominating like we kind of seen in years past, because things are just continue to be clicking. But we talked about Yoshi a little bit last week, and I think that has remained the case. Like he has yet to have a bad practice. He's catching everything. The game just feels slower to him, I would assume, and he's just managing all this new stuff that's being kind of put on his plate. And I think there's going to be a real conversation, like I said, between who's going to be wide receiver 3 by the time September comes around.
Really interesting set of circumstances. We talked Gesicki and, the Bengals receivers, et cetera. Really interesting set of circumstances going forward, because this week, Eric All was activated to and cleared to practice. We were wondering if he was going to be a pup guy. We were wondering, if he's, when is he going to come back from the injuries sustained, et cetera. Came back, I think, quicker than a lot of people thought. And kudos to the Bengals too, because obviously they did their due diligence on him in drafting him, because, he's a talented guy that fell a little bit because of the medical stuff. And so I think maybe had teams said, hey, this guy's going to be cleared. If you had that foresight, this guy's going to be cleared to practice after the first week of training camp and ready to go, he might have gone a lot higher, right? So if you kind of had that crystal ball. So Eric All now enters the mix at tight end, which we've talked about that being a very crowded group. Gesicki, whether whatever you consider him, hybrid player, that sort of thing. Gesicki, you've got All in there now. You have Tanner Hudson in there, Drew Sample, Tanner McLaughlin. So there is a lot of talent all of a sudden in that position, and Eric All makes it even more interesting now that he is cleared to practice.
Yeah, I mean, just seeing like it was, I think, his second or third practice back, and he was in 7-on-7s, and there's not a ton of contact that comes in those drills, but when you run like a post in the red zone towards the middle of the field, and you just you're at the end zone going up for a pass, sometimes you may take a hit, and that's exactly what happened with him. So he caught it at the goal line, and he took on contact at the catch point. He came down with it, and I think he landed, relatively softly as you could in that situation. But that was the first time I think that he's seen that type of collision since he tore his ACL. I believe it was October 14th of last year. So it's been just over 9 months since his second major injury in college. He got cleared, 9 months and 2 weeks afterwards. And now he's right back in the thick of things. You would think there'd be some type of ramp up to make sure he would not be in these situations until maybe just the preseason. But if he's ready to go, he seems ready to go. And this is just another case of not every injury, specifically ACL, is the same. Like you remember last year, I think Cheeto got activated like a day after training camp began last year. He suffered a torn ACL the Halloween prior, but it took him a long time to really get up to 100%. He was still being limited throughout practice, throughout training camp, and even during the first part of the regular season. If Eric All's good to go week 1, that is such a huge boost. It creates such a unique question at the tight end spot. Are they really going to keep 5? Are they going to let Tanner McLaughlin maybe test waivers? Are they going to try to bring back maybe a Tanner Hudson after cutting him to make sure that they have enough room to fit everyone else on the roster? That's a lot of gymnastics that they have to deal with in a month's time, but it's such a luxury now to have your 4th-round pick who was out for all of OTAs and wasn't healthy to test the combine. It's such a luxury to have him back in the swing of things and looking like himself, because now that position group went from you had no tight ends under contract when March started to now you have 5 that you'd probably feel comfortable making the team.
We've talked about this too, that position group, and you that specific example you presented with All coming down with that ball at the goal line and getting in there. I mean, this just again plays to a point. That position group's strength and depth now points to an opportunity for the Bengals to improve upon an issue that it's largely been a postseason issue, but an issue that allows them to improve upon, and that is red zone offense, right? There's a lot of short yardage carries with Mixon or touchdown opportunities that became field goal opportunities. And so if you can flip that, especially when you're talking about a little bit of an easier schedule that Aaron talked about, based on metrics and standings of last year, et cetera, you have a chance to be a pretty powerful offense once again.
And it was such a big emphasis for them too. Like on top of just explosive plays, just finishing those drives to make sure that you're not settling for 3 in those spots. And obviously the run game is a part of that as well. But like the tight end spot looks pretty good at this moment. And there's still questions to be had about what the true roles of Gesicki are going to be. Like, is Drew Sample going to see some different alignments and whatnot? Is Tanner Hudson, like, he was the best tight end they had last year, and now he's almost like fighting for playing time again, at no fault to his own, because he still looks really solid in training camp, and he's developed a ton of chemistry with Jake Browning, and now he's starting to do that again with Burrow, because mind you, like, he really didn't get going until the later part of when right before Burrow got hurt, and then he had a lot of his production after Burrow got hurt with Jake Browning under center. So it's kind of been about reestablishing that chemistry and that communication, making sure that he's in the right spots going forward. But I think he's just earned so much trust with the coaching staff, and I think they're really glad that he's back to provide depth. But yeah, offensively, just in general, like the first week of camp has been, I think, a resounding success. I don't think Burrow has thrown an interception. I think it was James Rapine who said that on an episode of Locked On. So it's been 6 practices. I think he's practiced in 5 of them. He's only had 1 off day. and maybe he had like a half day here in between. So they're still monitoring his wrist, making sure they're not overworking him. I believe that's paraphrasing what Zach Taylor said, making sure that they're protecting him from himself. And Anthony, I don't really foresee that changing anytime soon. I think they'll still try to limit him up until you get into the late part of August and seeing if he actually participates a lot in preseason, or maybe it's just a drive here or there. But Burrow looks solid though. It looks like nothing's wrong with his wrist at all.
That's always good. What are your feelings just quickly before we get out of here in a couple minutes? What have you seen from the defense? It's been a lot of talk on offense, and as we know in training camp, offenses usually kind of shine a bit just because there's not true hitting, and there's a little bit of a layoff of defensive performance. But what have you seen from the defense so far?
Well, so far you've had Trey Hendrickson, and I think he's been out since the first practice because he's dealing with a minor injury that's not going to take him out for very long. Sam Hubbard had a minor injury scare as well, so he has a knee injury that he's kind of being day-to-day about. So you've had some shakeups on the defensive line, and I hesitate to put McKinley Jackson as a winner because I haven't seen a ton from him, but he is the starting nose tackle in some packages, and obviously, he's the only nose tackle that they have on the team, but I think that was still a question about how early they would want to feature him. And I don't even know if you want to call it a DJ Reader role because we still don't really know what that position is going to look like. But the fact that he's seen some reps with the ones in some packages is a testament to how far along they believe him to be. So I would say he's on the right track, or he's on track to being a heavy contributor immediately as even the fourth defensive tackle. But it does seem like DJ Turner is ahead of Dax Hill in the cornerback battle, which to me is not that surprising considering that he's the natural player at that position where it's Dax Hill is transitioning to. But it's not like Dax has been bad at practice. I think he's just had naturally more inconsistencies and more negative reps in comparison. I think with Turner, he's gotten his hand on the ball a lot more often, and that's huge for him considering he is typically really good in man coverage, but his lack of size and wingspan maybe prevents him from making a play at the catch point and whatnot. So the fact that he's, I think, improving in that regard is going to keep him ahead of Dax Hill for now. But as good as the receivers have been, I think DJ Turner has also proven to be a little bit improved compared to last year.
Yeah, that's kind of what I've seen a bit of as well. And, again, there's questions at cornerback that have to be answered for sure. But things are looking pretty good for the Cincinnati Bengals. It's still kind of lighter days. And, Ted Karras has been a guy that's praised Zach Taylor and his approach in camp and rest and all of that for certain players. So they seem to have a pretty good grasp on what they were doing and what they are doing and how they're managing players in camp. So good first week. Obviously they on Wednesday, they have a day off here. So let's drop the mic and get out of here. What do you got for us, John, on the way out of the show?
I do wonder how many of Burrow's teammates are going to be stashing stuff in his little mini fridge next to his locker. I think that fridge was there, or there at least was a fridge next to Burrow's locker. It was just ended up being a funny soundbite that they posted on Instagram of Jamar Chase being salty. One of the things that he's been salty about lately. But no, the locker room looks phenomenal. I said it yesterday on Twitter. The old locker room looked like a temporary solution that should have been upgraded pretty soon after Paul Brown Stadium was built, and they just never really got around to it. But it was like wooden. It wasn't bad, but it was just so outdated, and it was in dire need of a facelift. They got a D+ on their NFLPA report card for locker room quality last year. The NFLPA saw that on Twitter early. They saw the renovation, and they kind of gave the stock up symbol. So you would imagine that their grade is going to be significantly better this year. But I'm desensitized to locker rooms because programs like Oregon and Bama, teams with unlimited money in the college ranks, their locker rooms are insane. But for an NFL locker room, for especially the franchise like this that doesn't really spend, or at least historically hasn't spent a lot of money on this kind of stuff, the leap that they made from what it was last year to now is just bonkers to me. It looks really awesome.
It looks a lot better. And I loved the most recent iteration of the Tron movies. And so when Kara said, I feel like I'm in the Tron movie, I'm like, yes. But pretty sweet how they revamped that thing. It looks really, really good. The only thing I have really, it's just, I don't know, just a little anecdote. I've been kind of going back and watching some older games of the Bengals and not in the Joe Burrow era. I've actually gone back a couple of games I've recently watched just for some reason. it was in the 2013 season, and there was the Marvin Jones game against the Jets where the Bengals absolutely shellacked the Jets, and Marvin Jones had a big coming out party there. And the other was the late season win. It was pretty ugly, but a late season win against the Chargers, in which the Bengals, I think, eventually faced them again that postseason and lost to them. And that turned into the famous quote from, I think, Melvin Ingram that said, the Bengals did absolutely nothing different than they showed us a month prior, which was just maddening. But regardless, going back and watching, and I'm not only am I like, oh yeah, kind of singling out and remembering some great plays from some players there, but also looking at it and kind of saying, wow, this is now 11 years ago that these games were going on, and just how quickly time goes by, how different the Bengals are right now, and all of that. So at any rate, just kind of taking some strolls down memory lane. And I see Brandon here saying I've been doing the same thing, 2013 Bengals versus Pats. You can watch that on NFL Plus, their replays. It is a paid deal, so you got to check that out. But anyway, just kind of wanted to share that. I've been doing that. But let's get on out of here. John, thank you again for setting up the great opportunity with Aaron. That was fantastic. Go again. Get that FTN 2024 Almanac from Aaron Schatz and Company. Go check out, you can get it in Amazon, the FTN site. We've linked that there. We'll put it in the show description on YouTube as well as in the post on Cincy Jungle. So go check out that. Thank you again, John, for arranging that. And thanks to Aaron for his time, for coming on the program. Hope you all enjoyed that. Hope you enjoy the rest of your week. And we will be back very, very soon with more Bengals talk for you on the Orange and Black Insider. Go to Believe in Cincy, resubscribe to the channel, and leave us a review. Take care.